Today we will be discussing about a very important topic from both your prelims perspective and also from your mains perspective. Also there were many previous year questions also from this particular topic which we will be discussing in this lecture. So today we will be discussing about Civil Services Board, and the context of discussing this, the current affair context of discussing this topic is that Punjab, the government of Punjab, the state government has constituted a Civil Services Board. So we will see what is a Civil Services Board, what is the function of a Civil Services Board. We will also be discussing about what is the composition of Civil Services Board, and then we will see whether the Civil Service Board is the ultimate authority or who will be taking the final decisions regarding the transfers and the appointment of the IAS officers in a state government. And also we will be discussing about the Supreme Court judgment, the previous Supreme Court judgment regarding the same issue with regard to the transfers and the appointment of the civil servants in a particular state. We will see what are the observations made by the Supreme Court, what are the recommendations given by the Supreme Court, and also we will see what is the judgment of the Supreme Court in that particular issue. Then we will also be discussing about what is the way ahead or what are the solutions to ensure that the executive in a state and also the legislature, executive means the council of ministers and the legislature means the MLAs in a state. So when it comes to the state government, the legislature includes the members of legislative assembly and the bureaucrats. So bureaucrats, how they can work in coordination and cooperation with each other. So we will see what are the solutions. A very important lecture from your mains perspective. You can expect questions in the GS paper 2. So in your GS paper 2 you can expect questions from this, an analytical question. So I will be explaining in detail. Also in your preliminary examination, it's a very important topic. In the year 2016 in the prelims examination, a question regarding the Civil Services Board was asked in the exam. So from all that perspective we will be discussing this topic, analyzing this topic in much detail. Let's begin the lecture. Let's start with the current affair. So as I said, the Punjab government, the state government of Punjab has set up a 3-member Civil Services Board. So the latest state to constitute a Civil Services Board, it is the Punjab state government, and it becomes the 20th state in India to set up a Civil Services Board. Now what is the purpose of Civil Services Board? A Civil Services Board, it is responsible for making recommendations. That point is very important. It is not for making transfers but for making recommendations regarding the transfers and the postings of the IAS officers in a particular state. So the transfers and the postings, the appointments regarding the IAS officers in a particular state, it is recommended by the Civil Services Board. We will see what is the composition. We will also see who will take the final decision. Now coming to the details of the Civil Services Board, it's headed by the Chief Secretary of a state. Now this was the question asked in the 2016 UPSC Civil Services Preliminary Examination. So Civil Services Board is headed by the Chief Secretary of that particular state, and also the Chief Secretary is the head of the IAS officers in that particular state. So Chief Secretary is the senior most IAS officer in the state. Usually the senior most IAS officer in the state is appointed as the Chief Secretary, and Chief Secretary will be heading the Civil Services Board. And also the Civil Services Board has senior most additional Chief Secretary or Chairman, Board of Revenue, Financial Commissioner or an officer of equivalent rank and status as the member. So these are the members. So this is the composition of a Civil Service Board. As we have seen in case of Punjab, this will be a 3-member board. The Civil Service Board provides for state to follow centre's guidelines on giving fixed tenure of at least 2 years for cadre officers. Now the Civil Services Board, the very purpose of creating or establishing a Civil Services Board is to ensure that the state government follows the centre's guidelines. Now what are the guidelines given by the centre? It is regarding the security of tenure. Security of tenure of the civil servants. Regarding fixed tenure of at least 2 years for cadre officers. Now here two things are to be discussed. One is regarding security of tenure, and second one is regarding the cadre officers. So first let's come to security of tenure. Now if we look into the All India service, that is the nature of All India services. So many of you must be preparing for civil services. So how does this happen? UPSC, which is a constitutional body created by the constitution, UPSC, who is also the watchdog of the merit system of the country, conducts the examination. So civil services examination is conducted by UPSC, which is a central authority. So it is actually the central government that recruits. So recruitment is done by the central government. Examination is conducted, again recruitment is done by DOPT, Department of Personnel and Training. So recruitment is done by the central government, whereas these officers are allotted to different state governments. That is, they are given some cadres. So this is called cadre officers, which means after the result is published, suppose you get selected into the civil services, and according to your rank and the preferences that you have given, you will be allotted a particular cadre, and you will be working in that particular cadre for your entire career, except for some few years of deputation to the central government. Otherwise you will be working in that particular cadre. So the All India services, or the nature of All India services itself, gives us an idea about the federal structure of India, how we have a cooperative federalism or how we have a competitive and cooperative federalism, because it is the central government that recruits the officers, but it is the state government which will take care of all the expenses, including the payment of the salaries and other allowances for these officers. So recruitment done by the central government and appointed in corresponding cadres or the state governments under certain state governments. So this is the nature of the civil services, which is a All India service. Now you have to remember here that not all the services under civil services are All India services. There are only 3 All India services we have. One is IAS, Indian Administrative Service, another one is the IPS, Indian Police Service, and the third one is the IFOS, which is the Indian Forest Service. So these are the only 3 All India services that we have. And in All India services, this is how the posting is done, the cadre allocation is done. Now the central government has given certain guidelines to ensure the security of the tenure of these officers. So that is why the CSB, the Civil Services Board, is constituted at the state level to give recommendations to the state government in a way to ensure that these officers have the security of tenure. I hope you got the point. Now let's move on. Now if anyone recommends the transfer of the officers before the completion of tenure, then the CSB, the Civil Services Board, will examine and effect it. So if a recommendation is given for the transfer of any particular officer before the completion of this tenure, that is 2 years, then the CSB, Civil Services Board, will look into it, examine it and give effect to it. But the final authority in this regard is the Chief Minister of the state. That is why we said it can only recommend. The term recommend is very important, because the CSB, the Civil Services Board, will give the recommendations, but the final decision is taken by the Chief Minister. So we can say that the executive will take the final decision. So Chief Minister will definitely consult the Council of Ministers, and Chief Minister will be taking the final decision in this regard. Now let's see what are the benefits of CSB. Now to understand the benefits, we should understand what is the primary function of CSB. So primary function of CSB is to ensure the security of tenure to the civil servants, especially the IAS officers. So let's see what are the benefits. First thing, if the officers have a fixed tenure, they will be able to provide better administration. So if they have a fixed tenure, they will be able to provide better administration. Their administrative efficiency will increase. Second one, they will also feel safe and try to stick to the rules instead of pleasing the political bosses, which means that they will be politically neutral. They can maintain political neutrality and they can function without any political bias. So if the security of tenure is dependent entirely on the political side or on the political leaders, then what happens? The officers or the bureaucrats try to please the politicians. So if security of tenure is given, then they can work without pleasing the political leaders. Third, every official requires at least 3 to 6 months to get into the routine of a new place. Suppose you enter into a new job, whatever job it is, it will take at least 3 months for you to get into that system, to know the system. So if frequent transfers happen, once you get into the system, you get transferred. So your efficiency will definitely go down. Same is the case with civil services. So if they are given a security of tenure of 2 years, then this will mean that they can better deliver the services, and also they will be able to provide better services to the people. Now, what are the issues related in that? So the security of tenure also comes with some issues. One is the functional and administrative problems. So this includes that the officers may overstep the authority and jurisdiction of the state government. So this can lead to bureaucratic activism of bureaucracy. And also there are possibilities that the bureaucrats become less answerable and accountable to the legislators, because they have a security of tenure. So there is a chance that they become less answerable and less accountable to the legislators. And with fixed tenure, the political executives feel their influence has reduced to nothing, and this will create problems. So political executives, what they feel is that their authority has reduced with regard to transfers of the IAS officers. So this will again create problems between the bureaucracy and the executive. And again, the bureaucrats, they feel the urge to go to the courts for effective implementation of the guidelines in letter and spirit. So when there is a civil service board, then the bureaucrats will also approach the courts if the security of tenure is not given. So what happens with all these problems? The administrative efficiency will come down. So it can affect the administrative efficiency. Now let's come to the background at which the Punjab government has issued this notification. So Punjab government's notification, it's based on 2014 order issued by the central government. And as we said, the central government order in 2014, it was to provide a security of tenure to the cadre officers. And the order was aimed at providing stability of tenure and checking political interference. Two objectives of the central government order. It was first to provide stability of tenure or security of tenure. Second one, to check political interference. And Punjab has become the 20th state in the country to adopt a civil services board. So it is the 20th state in the country to adopt a civil services board. In October 2013, this is again very important, the Supreme Court judgment or Supreme Court observations in this regard. In the year 2013, the Supreme Court also mandated minimum tenure for the bureaucrats to insulate the bureaucracy from political influence. So even before the central government passed the order, the Supreme Court mandated that the bureaucrats should be given a minimum tenure of a particular period. And why? This is to insulate, that is to separate the bureaucracy from political interference or political influence, and put an end to frequent transfers of the civil servants by the political leaders. So Supreme Court already made an observation in 2013, and it was also based on this observation that the central government issued the notification in 2014. Frequent and arbitrary transfers of officers before completion of a reasonable tenure on any post have always been considered as a major reason for declining standards of administration. So this was another observation made by the Supreme Court. So frequent transfers or arbitrary transfers of the officers before they complete their tenure, this is another reason for declining the standards of administration. As we said, it will take at least 3 months for an officer to get used with the system or to get familiar with the system. So if the officer faces frequent transfers, what happens? The efficiency, administrative efficiency will come down. And examples, IAS officers like Ashok Kemka, Durga Shakti Nagpal, Kuldeep Narayan, etc. have allegedly been victims of arbitrary suspensions and transfers. When you are giving a answer in your ethics paper, you can mention these examples as well. Now this topic can be asked in your GS paper 2 and also in your GS paper 4, ethics, integrity and aptitude. Now, what is the way ahead or what has to be done? A healthy working relationship between the ministers. Ministers are the executives. Now, MPs and MLAs, they are the legislature, and civil servants, they are the bureaucrats. So, a healthy relationship between executive, legislature and the bureaucrats is critical for good governance. So, a cordial relationship between these organs or these functionaries of the government are very important for good governance. And the state here refers to government. So government needs to take every stakeholder of governance into confidence. Now every stakeholder of governance includes bureaucrats as well. They are also a critical part of the governance. The state can learn from the loopholes of other states in implementing the fixed tenure rule. So Punjab government can learn from the loopholes in other states and effectively implement the guidelines.